We're back here with James and Nils. We're talking about quite some predictions 2023. And the topic that we'll follow is about Google fighting over multiple fronts. It's been quite of a year for Google on the front of AI, as we already mentioned. There's competing with Microsoft, and there are lots of proponents of Edge winning over Microsoft, winning over Chrome. Although I'd say that this is not the big issue that we're here to talk about. It's more about how Google is affecting the publishing business, and how it as both an ad server, demand partner, and a DSP is going to change in the following year. And also I'd like to include things like tracking. Universal Analytics is shutting down for GA4. Google Optimize has announced that it's going to get closed as well, moving to GA4. And we have a DOJ lawsuit against Google and its monopoly, as they claim, over the advertising business. Although Google's saying that they have just a small percentage of it. Let's open up just this time with Nils. What do you think is gonna affect publishers on the Google side of things?
So, I mean, let's start with like the Google Analytics part of it. To this point, there's still a lot of publishers who either miss the old version of it or wish it to be back. There are many features and capabilities missing in the new system. Although from like a kind of like business intelligence or data insights part, it is actually more clean and more up to kind of pace with like normal BI systems. So on one side, I'm thinking that, yeah, there are many integrations missing and kind of data points missing that people were used to from before. But at the same time, many will disagree. I do think it is a bit more clean and more in line with basically like overall business intelligence solutions on the market, with how it is basically working and operating, the flexibilities of it, and so on. So from my kind of perspective, it's kind of like 50-50 on the good and then the bad side of it. Now, if you talk about like the advertising side itself, primarily Google Ad Manager, Ad Exchange, and so on. Yeah, I mean, it's no secret. Everyone knows it in the industry that given how they are being intertwined with each other, it is making it very difficult to kind of work with other solutions in the mix without sacrificing revenue. And it has been for a long time. So yeah, I do agree with kind of like the lock-in mechanisms being in place. So I'm curious about how it will go, and if something does happen in the end, if it will kind of bring like a revolution basically to the, for example, the ad server market, which has been completely dominated by Google so far. On
the display side.
Other companies like, on the display side, with other companies like Xandr, as well as Smart or Equitive, not really having any chance to capture much market because of those dynamics.
James?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the DOJ case is just, it's going to change everything. I mean, Google's the water we swim in, right? Like that's, we're just fish in their pond in a lot of ways. And last summer, the Department of Justice rejected the idea that like Google offered to split off its ad business, right? And say, okay, this is bad. Here, let's just split off this business. And the DOJ said no, and that's pretty crazy. Yeah, like here, we'll split it. They want to go to court and break this thing up in a big way. And, I mean, it's going to be, it's going to be a lot of uncertainty. Like you don't know what this is going to look like. And I've thought about it. I can't, are they going to split the ad server and the ad exchange? And like, are they going to split those all into different companies? And if that happens, if they split it along sort of the bigger divisions inside Google, measurement, all of that stuff somehow, like, what does that look like? I don't, so to me, like the technical challenges of GA4, I think I think are real, and I think that it's going to take time for the world to adjust. I think publishers would be smart to like find another measurement tool or analytics suite now that they were also running. Start to get to know like your Cloudflare numbers. Cloudflare has some page view measurement, so that you can see if things stay consistent after the switchover. Right, like that's you need to have sort of a second perspective from a publisher's point of view to measure things, so that you can see if there are any changes. Right, so that's one solution to that. But
the truth is that universal analytics has been on publishers, and not only the publishers' website, for quite some time now. It's a dominant player on the market, similar to what we have on the search end. And even if companies like Adobe or others on the market provide better service, nobody cares about it because it's not free for the majority of websites. Okay, some companies may pay for Google Universal Analytics, and they may choose to have Adobe, but why? They're already on that tech and they're used to it. Then there is also some legal scrutiny over it. I do know of companies, part of big conglomerates, that have switched off to Google Analytics entirely for the European market, because some European countries are saying that the data should be stored inside Europe servers. And I guess that won't be that hard to overcome as an issue. But I've seen actual websites saying we won't have analytics on that end. And if 5 years ago I was used to the thought that you cannot, sorry about that. So if 5 years ago I was used to the thought that you cannot have a website without your Google Analytics on it, now I'd say that is no longer so true, and things are changing.
Yeah, I don't know. Like if I'm running a website and I don't have Google Analytics, I'm using, whatever. I'm using Cloudflare or whatever, and I go and I'm trying to sell my traffic. I mean, I think it's very hard. I think, I think ad networks would look at you like, let's just say, it's a site and they've got, they'll be like, well, I don't even know if this traffic's real. I mean, that's a large part of what an ad network or some advertising shop does is when they're bringing on a client, try and figure out, is that traffic real? Is that now if they're running their own advertising stack, it doesn't matter. But if they're looking to a third party, I think that it does, it creates friction in that transaction that you're not, and I've seen that firsthand a couple of times where, they're using some alternate measurement tool and, the business development people sit there and look at it and go like, I don't know, what does that really mean? How valuable is this? How do I value this deal? And without the standard, you don't know. And Google changing that standard. I think the market will adapt to that. But that's always going to be difficult. And and publishers, like all of this is in a large way because publishers want to work on, creating good content and not worry about, sort of the quote unquote technical aspects of what they're doing. And this is just turning that table upside down and saying, okay, everybody has to stand against a new measuring stick.
I've trusted to work websites from Universal Analytics to GA4 in the past year or so. Even before that, even when it came out, I said, okay, we need to have this as well on top of Universal Analytics. And to be fair for this, they did change a lot of things when it comes to the tool. So it's now better than it used to be a year ago, which is good for them. But do you know what was the hardest thing to do and to achieve in GA4? It was adding it and making it work correctly on AMP. And it's funny because AMP, even though it's an open source project, even though if Google are taking a stance out of it, and again, after some legal scrutiny, they're saying we're not no longer gonna promote AMP content on search. We will purely look at the speed data, but it seems like it's dying. I mean, even Google don't consider it when it comes to GA4 right now. There might be something coming in the next year or something like that, but it's kind of difficult to attribute it in there. And it seems like AMP, one of the big traffic factors for publishers in the past 5 or 6 years, is no longer relevant for the market, and there are many publishers switching out of it, probably just because of the differences in the revenue. Yes, what do you think? Would you suggest to quantifiers to have AMP to get some more SEO juice out?
So I mean, like the entire AMP implementation probably only happened because it was being prioritized above other stuff for a long period of time. So especially publishers that needed the search traffic, basically kind of had to adapt it, and it has always been somewhat of a pain to use it because it is a bit kind of like a closed ecosystem. It is not as open as the other, like the normal setup, meaning that only very few implementations actually work. And most of those implementations have been the ones from Google, of course, like within their own ecosystem, making it work in the beginning, which also makes sense. But at the same time, the kind of capabilities of building any kind of integration into AMP is super, super limited. And even Google wouldn't be able to do what they are doing if they would be abiding to the same limitations, pretty much, in many cases. So, yeah, it's been like, yeah, it definitely does speed up things up and making things really, really fast. However, at the same time, publishers do have the methods to achieve similar kind of performance without using AMP at all.
To be fair, they do have these methods now. Several years ago, when AMP was introduced, publishing websites were a lot slower, and that's true.
Yeah, but back then we still already had the option to create like static kind of systems, where basically the page would already be completely done. Nothing would need to happen on the server. It would be directly solved from the CDN. It already existed. It was already being used, but more in the, let's say, tech-savvy parts, not really by editorial or otherwise publishers. But the technology has been around for a very long time to do it. Of course, what is tricky within those kind of setups is that the page can be really fast, but the advertising side will still slow it down a lot. So while the page is fast and loading quickly, it is quite possible that one is just not able to load those advertisements in time if one is loading them asynchronously before the user is already kind of off the page in many cases. So it did definitely help in that regard of making like parts of the ecosystem of the advertising faster. And this is really like the part I'm hoping that will survive. And this is the entire kind of ecosystem around those AMP advertisements, because they are really fast in terms of loading, but they are also pretty safe in terms of, for example, what you're allowed to do within them in regards to mobile redirects and other kind of security related mechanisms. Given that they are so limited in that regard, it is really good because they are part of like an open ecosystem where a lot of kind of misuse of that ecosystem is possible, and they are limiting what is possible heavily.
Yeah. So basically, if we have to conclude this topic, we do have Google fighting over search, fighting over analytics, fighting over optimized market. Although I'd say there are not that many Google optimized alternatives right now that does not got quite a lot of money out of that. Probably Assertive Yield Manager is one of it, but it's also part of a whole product that won't suit everybody's needs. Then we also have the DOJ that is moving against the Google monopoly, and we don't know what's going to happen there. We even have the fact that last year Google kind of lost over Microsoft when it comes to monetizing Netflix. Just one funny story out there in the world. AMP is being left behind, and we do have even the Gonzalez vs Google, this shift that's happening right now can really change the internet platforms and the idea of that, even though it's mostly on US. So, but yeah, I kind of hope, and full disclosure, I have the biggest part of my portfolio in the stock portfolio in Google, and I kind of hope that they can bring quantum to a commercial level in the next several years so that I can get my money back.